Hi, I'm making another video. I'll probably end up being a couple videos about Paiste cymbals. I just made one on 602s and the whole deal. But it's funny, on the history, I wanted to talk about the history of Paiste. And of course, I don't work for Paiste, but I just over the years have collected a lot of drums. I've had so many cymbals come through here. Well, not here, but at other places I've lived. And but it's funny, with the Paiste cymbals, for the longest time they made them out of nickel silver, which is copper and nickel. And it's a cool alloy. It's real soft. Most of those ones you hear, like the Dixies and all those, the old, like the Ludwig standards, most of those were nickel silver. I want to say they even made nickel silver cymbals up until there was a 402 series that they had in the 90s, which was nickel silver. And those actually sounded kind of cool. But then I think after that they ditched the nickel silver. But in any case, but then in like '65, Paiste sort of came up with B8 alloy, which they didn't come up with it. I mean, I'm sure it was an alloy that was used in manufacturing or something. But they decided to make cymbals out of it. And of course, they started with the B20 alloy in like '57, I think, when they said they brought the Formula 602 out. But anyway. So in 1965, they came out with Stambul. They had Stambul cymbals before that, but in Stambul '65, and I've never seen, like I've never held or played a Stambul '65 because I think it says it right on the cymbal. Although I might have seen it at a drum show. I didn't play it though. I don't know. But that was really their first B8 alloy cymbal, which again is 92% copper and 8% tin versus the 80% copper and 20% tin of Zildjians and Sabians and Istanbuls and Bosphorus and of course Zildjian, the regular Formula 602, the regular classic alloy. Although I want to say maybe I think Paiste symphonic gongs might be nickel silver. I don't know, great gongs, expensive too. And but I think what happened is then the Stambul '65, and they might even had Stambul '67, I don't know, but in about '67 they came out with giant beats, which were a B8 alloy cymbal. And I have a funny story about giant beats. I remember when I was really little, I started playing drums in 1982. But I remember my brother played Led Zeppelin, and I remember listening to like the sound on the record, and it was a record, Houses of the Holy. And when you listen to the cymbals on like the Crunge, I mean, it's just such a beefy. I remember being like, God, those cymbals sound so great, And I remember when I looked at the album sleeve of the song "Remains the Same" my brother had, and you could see one of the pictures Bonham playing. You could see the word Paiste or pasty stamped underneath the cymbal. I was like, oh my God, those aren't Zildjians, So when I looked up and I was trying to find all this information about Paistes, because I think the sound on those Zeppelin recordings and on the song "Remains the Same" and stuff, that cymbal sound is. I don't know about. I mean, a lot of guys must agree with me. I know a lot of jazz guys don't, but that is to me just an incredible cymbal sound. That psh, I mean, just perfect. And so I kind of went on my Paiste quest from there. And I remember for Christmas I got a Paiste 14-inch pair of 505 hats, and I went to Guitar Center at $100, and I was like, I don't know, 12 or 13. I was like, listen, buddy, I have $100. I want to buy a pair of Paiste hats. He's like, well, it's like normally, these 505s I think were 140 or whatever. But he's like, all right, dude. So he went and he had two loaners, singles, orphans. He had a 14-inch heavy top and a 14-inch medium bottom, which of course meant they were about the same weight, because a heavy top was heavier. A medium bottom was a heavier cymbal, like in the New Beat way. There's usually a thinner cymbal with a heavier bottom. So I was getting a heavy top and the medium bottom. So they sort of kind of weighed the same, but it was a great pair of hats. It was my first pair of Paiste cymbals, brand new. Guy gave them to me for $100 out the door in 1982. It was awesome. I was like, wow, Anyway, but around that time, my brother had a Led Zeppelin book, and I know this is going to be full of digressions and tangents as usual, but he had a Led Zeppelin book that mentioned giant beat, and it was weird because in other Zeppelin books they never really mentioned it again, and kind of like why would they until later, until like the past 10 or 15 years, because now it's 2011 obviously, but this was in like '81, and it was weird. I think this Led Zeppelin book had like Pez candies. It said like Led Zeppelin, like Pez or like a weird candy. Anyway, but they mentioned giant beat, and I remember over the years when I was little, I was like, giant beat, because it was just kind of cool, giant beat, and over the years, incidentally, over the years, in like the late 80s, when I used to go to shop, sometimes I'd see cymbals that said Paiste on them, but there was no mention. It didn't say Formula 602, or it didn't say, um, it just said Paiste on it, and I wasn't that familiar with them at the time, but it dawned on me now that those were giant beads. Anyway, or it dawned on me later that those were giant beads. Anyway, so I used to call around the time when I first was ordering my my cymbals through Thoroughbred, which I said in another video. I used to pay for the cymbals through Thoroughbred Music, but then call the people at Brea, California, and say, look, I want these particular ones, and they'd come. I remember saying, you guys, I saw in a book that you guys made a cymbal line called Giant Beat, and I remember they laughed. The lady was like, come again? I was like, Giant Beat, and she didn't know what I was talking about. And this is the truth. I'm not making this up. I mean, and I'd be like, well, and she's like, all right, well, whatever. And then I got, okay, well, how many other, do you have any, I got onto talking about, I think I said in the other video how you went and I ordered some, I wanted to compare the weights of cymbals because I was always curious about, like, anyway, you see the other video, the 602 video. And every so often I'd call again because, I'm a drum freak. I'm always be like, hey, Paiste people, what else is going on out there? Do you have any? And I was ordering, I ordered a couple other cymbals through them. But I'd call every so often. I'd say, listen, because around that time that I first called, it was around the time that I was calling them about the 602s, and I felt like they were making a mistake getting rid of them. But anyway, and I remember finally, it might even been in like 96 or 7. It was a couple of years later when I called, and I finally said, yeah, you guys, I said, I've called before about this. You guys used to make giant beads. And the lady's like, oh, you know what? She's like, it's you, She remembered me, I guess. She said, you know what? She said, Eric Paiste has one of those hanging up in his office. And I was like, wow. She's like, yeah. So he had one hanging up. I think it was a 20. I was like, you should make those again. I said, at the time, I'm not going to BS you. It's not that I used to say it to him, not that I went out and at that time found a bunch of giant beads knowingly and be like, God, these sound great. It was really just like, Bonham was my hero, and I wanted the cymbals he had. So that's why originally I used to say that to those guys. Say, you guys got to make giant beats again. Anyway, so it was funny. They had one in the office. They're like, oh, Eric Paiste has one of these. And it was funny because over the years I'd call and I'd talk to him again. I talked to a fellow out there named Andrew Shreve, which was a really nice guy. And he was, I'd be on the phone with this guy for an hour. Super nice guy, and, I'm a total drum cymbal geek, of course. And I used to mention him, like, giant beats hit me. He's like, you know what? I remember one day he said to me, he's like, you know what? He's like, somebody else was asking about those. And around the time, what happened was in the early mid-'90s, it was around the time, I think, Zeppelin, when Jimmy Page did the remasters, around the time when he redid that box set originally, there was a big sort of push. Around that time, like, Ludwig started making, they reissued the Bonham kit, the natural, like, maple kit. And they actually brought back the Vistalites around that. When they first brought back the Vistalites in the 90s, they actually, of course, classic Ludwig, or at least Ludwig of the day, made them just clear. It's like, like, all right, well, I know people, I'm sure, bought some. But then what they did is almost immediately following, if my memory serves, they reissued the Bonham kit. So the 26, 14, 16, 18. And those sold. And around that time, Paiste actually reissued around that time, I want to say it was 95 or 6, they reissued the Bonham cymbals, in the original weights. And I remember I saw a pair of those, or a set of those, at somebody's house, because I saw it in Modern Drummer. There was actually, I think, a way to win a pair. They actually had, and I remember this, it must have been like 94, because I think I was still living it was the 15-inch soundage hats, 24-inch ride model, 18-inch ride, 18-inch medium, 20-inch medium. And again, that's when I first kind of saw that. That was one of the first times I think I saw the specs where, like, wow, Bonham played an 18-inch ride as a crash, And then, of course, I went back, if you see the other video, how you ordered a bunch of 2002s, modern 2002s, red labels to compare the mediums and stuff, the rides, anyway. He's like, somebody else asked about those. And I was like, well, yeah, you guys should make them again. And around that time, I think I'd played one somewhere, and I thought it was a cool sounding cymbal because of the sustain. But again, on those recordings, with compression and stuff, you can dramatically alter the sounds of cymbals and drums, of course, when you record with compression and EQ and things, But somebody else had asked. Anyway, so that Ludwig had reissued the Amber Vistalite kit, and Paiste came up with this John Bonham. I don't know, Zeppelin was kind of coming back big. I don't know if they had a reunion concert or something. They obviously played Live Aid, but there was something else. Maybe like Ahmed Erd. It wasn't even. It was before that. Anyway, in the early mid '90s, Ludwig came out with the Amber Visalite. They reissued it, and they also had the Bonham kit 26, 14, 16, 18 in the maple, which then of course they expand. You could get in different colors and all kinds of other stuff too. But Paiste had the set, the 2002 set. Let me just check this time again. All right, I'm going to stop this video now. I'm going to make a part 2. Anyway, so again, Paiste came out with this set, a black label 2002 set. I don't know if they did it knowingly in tandem with Ludwig, or they figured since Ludwig was reissuing those kits, they might as well hop on the bandwagon or whatever. But those weights, I know for sure, the original 18 and the 20, those were the same weights as the original thinner 1970s 2002s. But then, of course, what they did is they came out again with black, and those were black label. But they came out again with the black labels in like 2001, 2002 to commemorate the 2002, the name. But those black label ones were essentially just regular modern 2002s with black labels, and they're heavier cymbals. In my opinion, Paiste started thinning out the cymbals again, sort of bringing down those really heavy weights about 6 or 7 years ago. Anyway, I'm going to make another video.